Hello from me, Lazarus. We continue with a series of lessons from the CSS course. We can open the books page again. And here in the CSS part, to open the first chapter, I opened it. As we have already mentioned gradually, the W3C consortium began to impose opinions that it is absolutely necessary to split page content from its layout, and that's why they were created. CSS were created. CSS is short for Cascading Style Tables or Cascading Set of Styles, by which appearance is determined and the layout of the HTML page. A style in CSS is called the rule, which describes and defines formatting of a page element. They are called table styles or set of styles because in them are successively described, through different styles, how they should look, to format and deploy the individual elements in the HTML page. They are also called cascading, due to the possibility the styles be inherited at each subsequent level. That is, when a certain style is applied for a given element, it is also inherited from its nested elements. Apart from HTML, CSS can also be used with XHTML documents, with HTML documents, and XML documents. CSS to date have several versions, 1, 2, 2.1, 3, and 4, as the last two are current and under development. They are divided into separate modules and their development continues until now. After all, the W3C consortium gradually succeeded in imposing the use of CSS in HTML pages, and that actually led to a split of the content and structure of web pages from their visual representation. At the end of this chapter, we will pay attention to something very important: CSS support by browsers. Although most CSS properties have been described long ago, there are cases where a property not included for maintenance in the given browser, or not included at all, but only partially. Also CSS 3 and 4 are also not completely finished, and many of the modules which are included in it are under development. The result is that not all properties are supported by all, and even from several of the more popular browsers. Another problem is that old versions of the browsers do not support CSS 3, so be ready for surprises. We continue with the first point: CSS syntax and basic concepts. In the HTML chapters we have already worked with basic CSS syntax when we used the style element. Let him recall this with an example, here. Here's how it was. P color, red, background color, light blue. This was an example. We set style for the paragraphs in the page. We set that the text in them will be in red color, and the background, in sky blue. And by removing the element tags, the CSS syntax will remain, that is, we see color, red background color, light blue, closed in curly braces. This row represents one CSS style or one CSS rule definition. Each CSS rule begins with selector, which actually represents The element we will style can be an HTML tag, identifier, class, and more. Then the declaration block is written, or the declarations which is enclosed in large curly braces. Declarations consist of pairs, attribute, value, separated by a semicolon. Here is the schematic representation. We have P selector, and this is the entire declaration block. The first pair, property value, property value. The sign in the last declaration. Before the braces, we may miss it, but I recommend always writing. Spacing, tabs, line wrapping. In CSS have no effect, so declarations can be entered, and on one line as in this case, but they can enter and on several lines. For example, they can be written like this. Each of these ways of writing, it has pros and cons. In the second way it is easier for reading and navigating in the properties but takes up more space, 4 lines. And when it comes to a large CSS file, it matters. There is no hard and fast rule here, every developer choose your own way of writing. But it's good to stick to one specific writing style in the entire CSS file. In this book, we'll stick to it. To a mixed variant, when the style is added to one line, we will write it in the first way. And if it does not add up, according to the second, the attributes and values, which are described in the declaration, must match to those in HTML elements, to which they will apply. In values that contain numbers, units of measurement must be specified, as between the number and the unit of measure. No space left. Example, 10px, there is no space between 10 and px. When fractional values are set, the delimiter is a dot. If the first digit is 0, it can be omitted. That is, to write instead of 0.7. Only 0.7, but I don't recommend it. The units of measurement that use in CSS are the same, which are also used in HTML, and were considered in Chapter 11 of the HTML section. For each visual element in HTML, browsers have set default values, and when not specified otherwise, they visualize it according to these values. Comments begin with this character and end with this /*. Example, this is a comment. In the CSS code it is very important to place meaningful comments in all important places. It is recommended to put comments, explanations, titles of individual parts of the HTML page, and on all selectors, for which it is not visible what exactly they refer to. Otherwise, especially with a large CSS file, simple. At some point you won't know which selector is for what. So, for example here. So we have such a comment. Here follow formatting selectors. At the top of the site, comments are usually added. And for the end, here are selectors for shaping the part with site content. Oh, I missed it, just above, for example. It can be the same for the left side of the site. Then for the content. Then for the bottom part, the footer. Comments can be helpful. And in cases of error, to test a given style, then you can To comment out a piece of code. To try out the rest of the code. Nesting comments within each other is not allowed. The methods of assignment of CSS style in the HTML page were considered in Chapter 7 in the HTML section. And for our examples, we will most often ask style in the part in the head of the HTML document. That's it for this tutorial. Best regards.